If you know anything about fitness in this country, you probably know Cooper Clinic in Dallas is the epicenter. Today's guest, Dr. Tyler Cooper, is going to help all of us, starting with me.
I have these people who come in who've accomplished every one of those mountaintops.
100%.
And they sit there and they say, why am I sad? Why am I depressed? I did exactly what the world told me to be happy, and I'm not. You're not here to achieve. You're here to live.
That's right.
And America, in my opinion at least, is obsessed with value of their worth by what they achieve. What is your motivation? Why are you where you are today? And then look at what's your biggest issue. Is it your health? Go find out. If I clear the slate of everything in my life, what am I adding back? And I can tell you in my own life, that's helped me so much, and there's freedom in it.
Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Dr. Tyler Cooper. Wow. CEO of Cooper Aerobics. This feels like 30 years in the making, does it not?
Known each other a long time.
You all have known each other a long time. Your mom and dad provided a gift to Carrie and me at the center when early days in Dallas. So this is a special time. Thanks for making time.
Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Today, by the way, is a Wednesday. What'd you do on Monday?
I was surfing.
Let's
surfing
go.
Monday. Yeah, surfing
California,
in Waco.
right?
Yeah, Waco. Waco is the mecca of Texas surfing these days. So being a former Baylorite, or still a Baylorite, I should say.
Yes, on the board. Yes, you're still there.
I'm still there.
You better claim it.
It is very fun to surf in Waco. I'll say that.
Talk to us about who y'all were surfing with. That's really, really cool what y'all were doing there.
Right. Yeah. So there's an organization I've been involved with for years. A friend of mine started called Adaptive Training Foundation. And they take military vets or people with any type of injury that has caused a paralysis or a missing limb. And they put them through a 9-week intensive exercise program to get them re-engaged in life. And so it's very much about regaining their physical abilities, but really their mental desire for
100%.
life. And so this was the end of a class celebration. And so we took all of them down there and we're surfing with these guys all day. So you're out there with people with one leg and people who are paraplegics. And so you had to have your A game on or you get, you get out surfed by somebody. But
that is
great organization.
It's incredible. Give me an experience from one of the guys or gals that was down there. I mean, who surprised you? I guess you probably met that group for the first time, right?
Right. Yeah. I hadn't met this group
because you were just
before.
Volunteering.
Right.
But, what's a story that surprised you?
There were so many wonderful people, but probably one that I helped quite a bit was completely paralyzed from the neck down. And so he had a life vest on and so forth. But the first time we put him on a wave on his belly, right, and we're pushing him into a wave, well, he falls over and he's face down in the water. Oh. And you're like, you expect him to roll over and start breathing, right? And you realize, oh goodness, he can't.
Yeah.
And just the matter of trust that he's putting in all of us to make sure he doesn't drown. Yeah. And it was just like, wow, he really can't help himself.
Yep.
And
just you having to realize you knew all that.
Right, yeah.
But instinctively, you're used to someone just popping up, and that's not going to happen without help.
I better get over that.
I better get over that.
So when he rolled over, was he calm? Or was he freaking out?
No, he's totally calm. Fine. Yeah, he's like, get me back on.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Okay. So it's just, it's such a game-changing perspective for our lives when you see the joy of somebody who can't do that, getting to do that, just the simplest things that we take for granted every day. For me, it's just a wonderful perspective check in my life of just to be grateful.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to dig into this topic a lot, that health is wealth. Your phrase you just used right before we started the podcast. I mean, that's someone like that realizes no longer can they take that for granted. So, but you and I, we might do that. So, go.
Yeah, no, I've seen that in my career so often. We're focused on preventive medicine. We're trying to keep people healthy. And so most of the time people come to us without any real significant symptomatic complaints. And over the course of my career in doing this, I've had patients come into my office who they walk in and they may be stressed about a business deal. They may be stressed about a relationship, whatever it may be. And then in those rare situations, I have to tell them they have a very, very serious illness, a cardiovascular or cancer. Everything that they cared about prior to walking in my office, they couldn't care less about. All of a sudden, they get laser focused on their health because you have your whole lifetime of precedence of waking up every morning, think you're going to wake up the next morning feeling fine until that one day you don't. And so it's easy to be to take our health for granted, right?
Yep.
It's easy to think that it's always going to be okay until the day that it's not.
Right.
And so what we really try to do is put the scale on your side, right? Of putting everything in your favor so that those things don't happen. Or if they do happen, we can catch it really early and maintain the quality and quantity of your life, which is the goal of our organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's phenomenal. Tell us a little bit about where you were raised. We named this decision points for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Think through some of those early years, maybe all the way through high school. Don't get to college yet. We'll get there. What were some decision points that began forming you and
Sure.
the way you think, the way you live, the choices you make? What are some of those times?
I grew up in a very unique family, to say the least. Very quickly, my father in 1968 wrote his book Aerobics, invented the word, and
That's so crazy still to imagine. It really is.
It really is. But essentially is credited with launching the entire exercise revolution. He's a physician, and prior to that time, people thought that exercise was bad for your health.
Isn't that crazy?
And then there were articles that said my father was going to kill more people than Hitler by promoting jogging. So, I always say the analogy is like, imagine you're a missionary and you go to this island where no one has your belief. And then by the time the grandkids come around from that original generation, you did such a good job converting the island that no one knew that generation doesn't know that they ever weren't that belief. Yep. And that's essentially what my father and our organization and our research has done with fitness.
Yep.
But to say that, so during those early years when I was born in 1970 here in Dallas, my dad had just moved here to start the Aerobics Center with the goal of proving the benefits of exercise for health. And it was very difficult. They tried to run him out of town. The board of medical professionals tried to take his license away from him.
Seriously?
Oh yeah, it was very difficult. So I grew up.
The fear of change is so aggressive,
right? And the medical theory at that time was that exercise, your heart only had a certain number of beats, and so if you ran through them more quickly, you're going to run out of them and die sooner, or that you're going to get hypertrophy, enlargement of the heart as a muscle, and it would quit working. That was what you were taught in medical school, and my dad in the 50s, right? And so he was. To your question, what I noticed as a decision point was the bravery of my father as a young man, as a child in my earliest years, saying, why are all these people attacking my dad? Why is my dad wrong? Are these things true? And hearing all that, watching my dad on TV debating, in 1984, I watched my dad on Nightline with Ted Koppel debating a Dr. Solomon from New York, Columbia Medical School, who'd written a book called The Exercise Myth, that said exercise really doesn't have a tremendous impact on you. All it does is release endorphins. And this was in 1984. I'm 14 years old and I'm watching this and I'm like, this is an Ivy League doctor debating my dad. And, it wasn't a few years later that we finally put out the first study that showed that exercise actually did improve your quality of life. But so it was really about watching the bravery of my dad to have conviction in what he believed in, and then having the good sense and the foresight to make sure that he's doing the appropriate research to ultimately prove what he did. But it was very difficult financially. Yeah. There was lots of stories there, but I think that's what launched me those young years of my life is conviction. Yep. Conviction in things that matter, conviction in things that change people's lives. I always say my dad never started the Aerobics Center to make money. He started it to save people's lives. Yep. Yeah. And obviously there's no mission without a margin, right? But that's still our day today, is that our purpose is to improve the quality and quantity of people's lives. And it's a real blessing to be a part of that, especially when you're on the front side of it, when you're not dealing with someone who's, farther down the road on an illness or issue.
Well, and what's amazing now is I was fortunate enough to go through the physical process in the spring. Mm-hmm. And, now you walk in and it's this beautiful building and everything is very well orchestrated. And, you've really thought about the patient experience for that day. And, look how far, you guys, your family, the Aerobics Center, everything you're trying to do has come in, 30, 40 years. It's amazing.
Well, it's interesting. My dad always says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do, is that we only see 3 patients a day. So we have the time, we're not in a rush, and your physical health is just one element of your health, right? Mm-hmm. That's right. Your mental, your emotional, your spiritual health. Those are all things that we have the time to delve into and allow people to look at their life in a different perspective. Mm-hmm. But if we didn't care, I mean, we're a private pay business, right? Insurance doesn't cover what we do. People aren't going to come if we don't care.
Yep.
And so it's not an adage of, hey, we got to do that to maintain our business. It's why we exist.
Right.
I didn't know that stat, that literally you guys only see 3 patients a day. You're talking about mission over margin.
Each doctor.
Understood. Right. Each doctor, but correct. I'm sure there's been at times, but Tyler, if you could just see 4,
right?
If each of us could just see 5,
right?
But the mission of what you all want is more important. Right. You have a sister?
I do.
Yeah.
Berkeley.
Yeah. Berkeley's older or younger?
Berkeley's older. She's 5 years older.
She's
than me.
5 years older. Right. Yeah. Your mom and dad, how are they doing?
They're great. I always say my dad's our best advertising. He's 92 and in the office every day. And he drove to Colorado this summer for vacation and met us in Europe. And he's quality of life is amazing. His brain is super sharp. And my mom as well. She's 88. Yep. But people ask me, they say, how's your dad done it? Was his genetics? Like, no, my grandfather died at 77. My grandmother died at 81. My dad has been focused on 3 things in his life. He's been consistent. Right? He's had conviction and consistency on 3 things. His number 1 is his faith. He's a very strong Christian. And so he has purpose in his life. There's a reason to get up in the morning. Yeah. There's a reason to live because you're on a mission. You're on purpose. He's very consistent in that. Second, he's super consistent in his diet and his exercise. He exercises every evening over at the fitness center, and his diet is in moderation. Again, not on the extremes of either end, but consistent.
Yeah.
And then the third piece that I believe has made him so successful where he is today, mentally, is that he's never stopped studying. And so what happens is so often I'll get people who come into my office and they just, they've retired from a big career and they feel like, oh, I finally made it. And I'm like, this is a big mistake, guys. Retirement is not quitting. Retirement is transitioning into something else where it doesn't matter how much you get paid and it doesn't matter how often you work, but you have to continue to always engage your brain. Your brain's like a muscle. If you don't use it, it's going to atrophy. And so with dementia being on the rise, obviously we see it all over the place now. We know that really those are the only things that you can do. Keep your brain sharp. Physical activity, socialization, humor are all things that help prevent dementia going forward.
I can already tell that we're going to need like 7 episodes.
We can stop right here.
I've got an hour, so you're going to have to fight for airtime here hard.
Right.
What are pragmatic things that you tell people to fight dementia?
Yeah.
So number 1 is fitness.
Really?
Number 1, we know absolutely that fitness helps decrease the risk of dementia. But fitness needs to be redefined, right? So most people think, if you ask a person on the street, are you fit? They think of like a Nike TV commercial where they see some young person who's no fat. And it's not relatable when 70% of our country is overweight or obese. But what we know scientifically is that if you're just on our treadmill, if you're out of the bottom category of fitness for your age and gender, which is the bottom 20th percentile, you're going to live 6 years longer. You're going to have less, your death risk goes down by 58%, quality and quantity, everything explodes. But it doesn't get much better from there. So the person who's going out and doing a brisk walk 3 to 5 times a week gets almost the same amount of benefit mentally, physically, and so forth as the person who's running 5Ks.
I tell Scott this all the time. CrossFit, he's throwing some kettlebell. And I'm just walking at Cooper Clinic around the path, and I'm just as fit as he is.
Right. Well, there's some incremental benefit, but
thank you.
But the biggest,
he's throwing you a bone right there.
I appreciate that.
He's throwing you a bone.
The biggest bang for your buck, the biggest ROI there is just not being, stagnant.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
sedentary.
Don't just sit.
Don't just sit. If you can just get out and walk 30 minutes most days of the week, you can even break it up into 2 15-minute blocks. It has a huge impact on your health. Being unfit, again, not just being sedentary, is just as dangerous almost as smoking a pack a day for 20 years.
Golly, wow.
But for the mental perspective, that's number 1. Number 2 is you've got to engage your brain. And so when people retire or they're moving on or they're working on projects or things, they're not really engaging their brain. I say, do you find something you like? Go learn to speak a foreign language, go teach a class, go study something that's totally foreign to you. It doesn't matter what it is. Learn to play the guitar. You just have to engage your brain. And so that's where I've seen it. My father, he just continues to study. He loves medicine. He has a passion for medicine. And so he's regularly studying every night. And it's kept his brain going. I always joke with him. I said, Dad, you got to live to 100 and die in a hang gliding accident because anything else is bad for business. So he's doing his part.
He's
doing his part.
Will he do the hang gliding part? Or
he hadn't done that yet.
Yeah. You're the extreme sport person.
Yeah, I would do that.
one of the things that stands out to be that number 2 there is, Scott and I had this conversation. I mean, our primary audience are business owners. They're hard driving. They're successful, same people that you are. And they think that exit then allows them to go check all these boxes they've been waiting on. And the struggle is, it sounds easy, just get involved in something bigger than yourself or engage your brain. But you've now lost the structure to which forced you to do that for 30 years.
And human nature is such that you're going to take the easy path most
100%.
of the time unless you're really intentional about it.
And you feel like you've earned it. I mean, I've been grinding 12 hours a day for 30. I just got this big check. And then all of a sudden the mind shift just happens. And now you're isolated. But to I know your faith, you're a part of that. That gives you that greater purpose. Were there more than just those 2 things primarily for
those are the main things. Yeah. Obviously, good sleep, socialization is really important. Mm-hmm. But when people think about retirement, I say you need to start thinking about retirement 3 to 5 years before you do. Yeah. I say take a white sheet of paper, write down every single thing that might seem interesting to you, whether it be going on a board to learning the tango dance. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
And then go tip your toe in the water on all those things and see if there's really any interest in them. And so it's a transition so that by the time you actually have your last day or whatever it may be, you're already well on your way into that next aspect of life that you enjoy. But if I may, I've dealt with a lot of this in my career, these people going through this transition, and I've learned it and I've watched it. And the analogy I use, I love to mountain climb. So I've climbed lots of mountains in the world.
No, go ahead and say. You're too humble.
So one of my goals is I climbed all the 14ers in the U.S. It took me 25 years.
And how many of them are there?
74.
Yeah.
And then I've climbed on every continent. All that to say, I've experienced a lot of climbing. And I had a patient ask me one time, what did you learn doing all those mountains, right? And I really sat and I thought about it and I sat on it. And this is what mountain climbing is like, right? So it takes a tremendous amount of preparation, endurance, training, courage, expertise, guidance. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of preparation and execution that it takes to get to a singular geographic location, right? But once you get to that location, after months of whatever it may have been to get there, you have this euphoric feeling when you're standing on that summit and you're looking around and you're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And all these endorphins release in you and it's just incredible. But after about 10 minutes, what you recognize is, man, if I stay here, I'm going to die. Literally, a mountaintop's where you go to die because there's no ability to sustain life. There's no food, water, shelter. You're exposed to elements, altitudes. And the world is shooting for mountaintops. And so the analogy that I use is that the world tells you to climb 4 mountains: power, pleasure, profit, praise, and if you have a faith, piety. As if you can reach it, plant your flag, say, hey, I wanted life. I'm good now. And I can rest. And I can be at peace. And for 10 minutes, metaphorically, they are until they realize, wait, this is what life's about. And the first time I ever noticed this, I was doing a rotation. You'll appreciate this, Doug. During medical school, I did a rotation at the Vale Hospital. Oh, yeah. So that I could ski. It's a very Tyler thing to do.
Of course you did.
Yes, I did.
So you were suffering.
Yes, right? I did. But I remember I was doing an internal medicine rotation and the doctor had me go in and do a history on the patient before he came in, right? And so I go in there and there's this mid-60s, well-to-do man. And I said, Mr. Smith, how can I help you today? And he said, I'm terribly depressed and I want to kill myself. I'm like, okay, let's break that down. Yeah. I said, what's going on? He goes, I moved here 3 months ago. He goes, for the last 30, 35 years, I've been busting my tail with my dream, my mountaintop, if you will, of having my big house up in East Vale and I could retire and plant my flag and I've won at life. And he goes, it's exactly what I did. And he goes, I've been sitting in that house for the first 2 weeks. I looked out at the aspens and it was beautiful. And then all of a sudden I realized I got exactly what I wanted. And this is what I spent my whole life doing. And now I want to kill myself. And it was just at that point in my life, I was like, well, that's not the answer.
Yeah.
And I've seen that
over and over.
I see it in my office every time. I have these people who come in who've accomplished every one of those mountaintops. 100%. And they sit there and they say, why am I sad? Why am I depressed? I did exactly what the world told me to be happy and I'm not. And, for me, my faith is what drives me. And it's because you're not here to achieve, you're here to live.
That's right.
And America, in my opinion, at least, is obsessed with value of their worth by what they achieve.
Yeah.
And because we're all of us, I shouldn't say all of us, but many of us buy into that lie that, oh, well, they must be happy because they're on the mountaintops. And if I just had what they had, we're overwhelmed with it by marketing and all these sorts of things. Instead of saying, listen, those are great. They're not wrong to climb a mountain. But if you think you can live there, you think you can stay there, you think it's going to give meaning to your life, you're sadly mistaken, and it's going to be proven out to you if that's what you think you can do.
So you don't know this, but one of the things one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is because most entrepreneurs exit and they're miserable.
Right.
The statistic is 75% of all business owners and entrepreneurs profoundly regret
they bought into a lie, right?
12 to 18 months later. And so at True North, we're trying to put together this program where we're focused on these different pillars. And one of the pillars is a coaching pillar, but all the things that you're talking about are the things that sit inside that coaching pillar. Right. And we're not necessarily going to be the coach. We would try to help our client or relationship find a coach, but to explore things like what's next, right? Because it may not be the mountaintop experience. And then, as you've probably experienced climbing, there's always the next mountain, the more challenging mountain, the higher elevation, the more technical, right? And like you never, there's always more.
Yeah, they always buy into like, well, this must not have been the right mountain.
Correct.
And so someone asked me, we were talking through this analogy and they said, okay, what's the ultimate mountaintop in the world? And we'd say, okay, to be the president of the United States. And she looked at me and she said, show me one president who's ever completely satisfied. Doesn't exist, right? That's what we buy into, is that there's always another mountain. And
because what happens is your friend in Vail, and obviously he had hit a real breaking point, which praise God, I hope he didn't take his
He did not.
life, but he got to the end of himself and realized, aha, it's not stuff. Because what most often you do, I got to go back into business and I got to go make 100 million more.
Right.
And I got to have a house so-and-so place. I love the line, we were created to live, not achieve.
Right.
That's really powerful. I want to go back a little bit. Walk us through your journey in becoming a doctor.
Sure.
It wasn't easy.
No.
Because
not at all.
For a while you said, heck no.
Right. No,
Walk us through that season of your life.
I grew up here in Dallas, grew up in Northwood Hills and went to public school there, then went to St. Mark's 7th through 12th. And, St. Mark's, wonderful place, but very much achievement-based mentality. And there's good to that in its proper form, right? But really had no clue what I wanted to do, except that I did not want to be a doctor. I did know that. And so
was that because of what you'd observed with your dad and the pressure and the kind of the attacks and all that kind of stuff? Did that play into that decision at all?
Yeah, I think it did. I think I saw my dad. It's hard to live with someone who has a true passion in life. Mm-hmm. There's very few people that have like a zeroed in passion for a specific thing in life. What is your calling kind of thing? It's a blessing when those people have that. Sometimes it's a curse because they can't do anything else. But my dad, that's why he's 92 and he's still reading medical journals every day, because he absolutely has 100% passion. So,
but it wasn't easy for you or Berkeley. It's not easy.
That's not at all. And I thought that's what it means to be a doctor, is you got to have this complete passion and obsession with medicine, which I didn't have. I didn't feel it. And so I also wanted to be my own man, right? I didn't, I had strong enough opinions that I wasn't planning on being Ken Cooper part 2. That was not my life's goal. And so I ended up, I was a good runner and I went to Baylor on a partial track scholarship and studied business because no matter what I did, I figured business would be a good degree to have. And when I graduated, still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had a chance to keep running. I almost joined the military. But then one of my dreams, I'm an adventurer. I love the mountains. And so I decided to move to Vail, Colorado. And my dad, who's had me working since I was 12 years old, he's very much of that mindset, had me sit down in his office right after I graduated. He says, "You got a job yet?" I said, "No, I'm moving to Vail to ski." and he says,
"It's good fitness, Dad."
Yeah, he just stares at me, and to his credit, it was one of the nicest things he ever did. He just stared at me. He said, "Son," he goes, "it's a great idea. I hope you can afford it." So I was like, "Fair enough." So I had $700 in a truck, and I moved to Vail, and I got a job working on building houses. I was a janitor at a health club. I had a lot of previous experience for that. And then once the snow fell, I got a job working on the mountain and guiding skiing. And And it was during that time, there's a verse in the Bible that says, be instilled and know that I am God. And so I moved there like, oh, this isn't a gap year. This was like, I might be here 10 minutes. I might be here 10 years. I don't know. I don't know. And I was just quiet. And one day I was working on a lift and long story short, I broke my finger, snapped it in half. And a few weeks later, I'm waiting in the orthopedics office to get it checked on. I'm sitting there on the table and I'm just waiting for him to come in the room. And this was back before cell phones. So you actually knew how to wait, right? And I look around and there's little Crayola pictures on the wall. And I sat there and I thought, I want to do something with my life where I can tangibly help people every day. I'm like, well, how do you do that? And you're like, well, you are in a doctor's office. And so I was like, huh. And so I always say it wasn't some lightning bolt from heaven. It was like a snowflake that fell. And I didn't tell anybody. And it just kept growing. It never went away. And it was just like the snow kept falling until it eventually turned into an avalanche where I was like, okay, I want to pursue this. But I was not done with my traveling. So after about a year or so in Vail, I moved to Australia, did the same thing, just explored. I spent a month on the Great Barrier Reef and just lived life. I was, sleeping in bus stations and in tents and doing that whole thing and odd and end jobs here and there. But just living and with what I was doing, right? But the thought just kept rolling. So finally I was like, okay, I'm going to move back to Dallas and I'm going to see if I even have an aptitude for this. Like I've never done I had 0 pre-meds, right? And so I started working during the day and taking pre-meds at night out at UT Dallas. And it took me 3 years to finish all that. And then went back to medical school and residency with the goal of coming back to Cooper, because what I realized when I was out of the shadow of my father and on my own and living on my own and all those things was, wow, our organization really does some neat stuff. Like that's a place where I can go work, where I know that every day I'm getting to help somebody. And that's what drove me back. And so now I'm fortunate because I get to run the business with my business background.
100%.
I also have a master's in public health. So I do a lot of public health and health management type things. And then I still see patients a couple of days a week. So it's been a great thing.
Well, and you were able to find your own voice by doing your thing for a season. And then really come back on your terms.
No, I knew if I was ever going to come back, it had to be because I wanted to be there.
100%.
Not because I was supposed
there was a pressure.
To be there. And so I talk to young people all the time that are trying to figure out life and they feel like they have to have everything lined up and understand exactly how they're going to get to that mountaintop right now. And it's just, they forget to live life. Life is this second we're living in right now with you guys. I mean, this is where I am. I'm present right here.
100%. But I think the other thing there too, Tyler, we talk to very successful people all the time. I think we're remiss not to mention their kids feel that pressure
without question
to be that successful. And your dad was much more public than many CEOs or successful people, but the pressure that many of the wealthy clients that we have, their children feel that pressure.
Absolutely.
And just the navigation of trying to find their own way at their own time, the expectation, I think it says a lot. We know you well, but for you to really make that comment, that was for your dad, that was an incredibly kind, supportive thing for him to say. He said, you got the freedom to go do whatever you want. I'm not going to pay for it. So that part was, and that's good boundaries on his part.
Oh, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because I had to know that I could make it on my own. When you come from a family of opportunity, you always in the back of your mind wonder, could I ever have done it on my own? And then there comes a sense of guilt, or there comes a sense of you deflect, and the way
or worse, then you just become totally entitled, And that.
Well, I always see it in two ways. You either become entitled or woe is me, or you say, well, forget that. I'm going to be better than you. And you set out to overachieve of what my dad changed the world. I was never going to do that. And the Lord knows I tried, but I was never going to do that. But what I recognized and I realized is that privilege is not necessarily privilege, right? It's a tool.
Yes, well said.
It is a tool 100%. In order to help other people. I'm very strong in my faith, and I believe I'm here for two purposes: to love God and love others. I was not born in East Somalia.
That's right.
I was not born in South America.
And you didn't have a choice on where you were born.
I had no choice of my parents. And so I can either be bitter about that, these challenges, or I can say, I was born in this family, in this situation for a purpose, which is to use the skills and the gifts and the abilities that I have for the service of the God I believe in, and to the benefit of other people, to show them love and grace. And it's nothing more than that. Did I need all these privileges to do that? Absolutely not.
Right.
I could have had more, I could have had less, but the mission is the same. And so it goes back to what I said with my dad. What's his primary purpose is that every morning he gets up, he's on mission. Mm-hmm. And the mission is, you never achieve the mission, right? That's the misnomer of it, is there's no arrival at that mission.
Correct.
Loving God and loving others is never a point of arrival. It's a mission that until the day I die is why I'm on this planet.
Your all's organization sees patients every day on the preventative side. We got that room full of 100 business owners, CEOs. What are the things that you want to start? What do you want to tell us? What are the traps we're falling into? What are the tools we can use to get out of the rut? Walk us through some of the challenge, inspiration, encouragement to move someone to maybe get them better in their health, all aspects of their life.
Sure. I would say from a physical perspective, number one is they use tobacco. I try to get them off tobacco for obviously all the deleterious effects with that. Number two is I try to get them to an adequate level of fitness that I described earlier. Because why do I choose those two things? Because I know scientifically from the published studies from our institute that that's the best thing I can do to improve the quality and quantity of their life. If I do nothing else, I've made a huge impact in their life in that regard. From there, then I move into things. So we have what we call getting Cooperized, the different steps of getting Cooperized that encompass these things. But fitness is number one. And then I always tell people you need a good physical. It's like driving a car and never looking under the hood, right? Mm-hmm. Just because it started and got you from point A to point B doesn't mean it's going to do it tomorrow if you don't take care of the car. So know your health, know your numbers, get a good exam. And so you know what you're dealing with. And then live life in moderation to the point of living it, right? Yep. So many people, they're in the past or they're in the future that they forget to live in the present. And you know, because in business, right, we're always looking at the pro forma, we're looking at the budget, we're always thinking about next year's performance. And I'm not saying that's not important, it is. But if it's at the consequence of not enjoying where you are today, it was interesting. I was at a party here in Dallas one time, a fundraising dinner, and there was a gentleman in town that I knew. I didn't know him well. I'd met him a few times, but he had just had a big liquidation event. I mean, big liquidation event, and he...
Can we get his name?
No, absolutely not. Because you would know it. But anyway, so he comes up to me and we're visiting, and I just say, "How are you doing tonight?" And he goes, I just made all the money I could ever dream of, and I'm spending the next part of my life trying to salvage my family. Mm-hmm. He goes, "I sacrificed my family to get to where I am today, and now all I care about is to salvage my family." Mm-hmm. And it was like, well, was it worth it? I mean, you got the houses all over the world, the planes, all that kind of stuff. Was it worth it? And again, it wasn't wrong that he did that, but was the sacrifice worth it for the reward when that mountaintop is 10 minutes of euphoria followed by death? Yep. And so it was just such an eye opener that it's so easy to fall into the wake, into the pattern of that's what we're supposed to do, right?
Right.
You know, 10 million is great. Well, 100 million must be greater. And I can tell you, I know a lot of really, really wealthy people, and I would tell you the majority of them are dissatisfied.
Yeah.
Mental health. Mm-hmm. You open to talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why, walk us through a little bit of your journey and why you think it's so fast growing. Is it maybe not fast growing? It's been there. We're more aware of it.
Right. No, it's definitely changing. It's an epidemic in this country. And I will tell you from my perspective, my opinion on this in watching this.
Yes.
I think so much of it is tied to the pace of our lives and the lack of mental rest. As I was joking earlier about the doctor's office, back in the day, you're sitting on the bed or the exam table and you're waiting for the doctor to come in, and maybe there was a magazine, maybe there wasn't, and you just sat with your thoughts. But because of phones and technology, people don't sit and rest their brains anymore.
I've never heard it put that way. Yeah. Mental rest.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's what I'm saying. Your brain needs rest. So if I drop down on the floor down here and say, Doug tells me, all right, do push-ups.
Yep.
Well, how many? No, just do push-ups. Well, I'm going to do as many as I can, hopefully a lot. I'm going to do as many as I can but eventually my arms just say, you're done.
Right.
You physically cannot do any more. Well, our brain is like that, right?
So interesting.
And so if I'm always have my brain on, like if I'm standing in line or waiting for a doctor and I'm scrolling through my emails, I'm scrolling through my texts, or I'm checking the news or what, when is my brain ever quiet? And so our brain, I think, in my opinion, is that our brain, this is our self-preservation of, I've got to get you to slow down. You're not doing it on your own. And so I'm going to allow your brain not to function in a capacity that it should. We also overvalue things like we were talking about. And so there's a lot of discouragement in the fact that you think you should have more. So satisfaction is lacking. And I think all of this wraps up into this mental health challenge that we're facing. I know in my own life, as I've struggled with those sorts of things, so much of it was based upon the fact that I felt that I was desperately needing to achieve. To find my worth and my value, that who I was based by what I could achieve. And I was achieving, helping people. I wasn't like trying to, build some great wealth. What are you talking about? I'm helping people.
Correct.
Right?
Mine is a good person.
Mine's a good thing, right? I'm helping people every day. I'm giving of myself freely. I'm doing all these things until the point where it just took me out. And I'm like, it's too much. It's way too much. And so at that point in my life, I was placed in a position where I could look at it, and I said, this is how I reframed it. I said, I didn't look at it as what am I going to cut out of my life? I said, I'm going to start from ground zero, and what am I going to put back in my life?
So good.
What are the things that are life-giving? And the other thing that I realized is like, man, God doesn't need me.
Yeah.
The world doesn't need me. And I believe God wants me, and I get to do good things. But listen, the world's going to go on whether I'm here today or not. And 100 years from now, no one's going to remember this conversation. But I'm here today because I want to be a part of the life that I'm in. And I want to participate in that life and be in the moment and do the things that I'm called to do without any expectation of arrival.
So you got really successful, busy CEOs and owners listening. And they're like, Tyler, that just sounds great. I'm just too busy.
What's the practical application?
How am I going to get at? Dude, I got like 3 companies I'm running.
Right.
I
think you asked yourself your questions. What are my priorities in my life? If those are the priorities of your life, is to run 3 businesses and sacrifice other things for that, and that's what matters to you, and you think that that's going to sustain you, okay. I mean, I can tell you what I feel. And I can tell you that's certainly not what sustains me. And it's certainly not what I've seen sustaining many people who have chased that in their life. But I think you have to ask yourself how you got there, right? Are you in that position? You're so busy because you're like that guy I mentioned, that he spent his whole life with that goal in mind, that he sacrificed everything along the way. Well, I have to do these things. I have to, this is what I do. No, you don't. You could walk out of your business today. I always joke, like you go back 200 years in an agrarian society, and you said, I think probably the stupidest question you could ask is, what are you going to do with your life? What do you mean what I'm going to do in my life? I'm going to try to plant some food, kill some animals, and have some shelter. I'm going to try to stay alive and hope the neighbors don't, rape and pillage my village. I mean, but now we're like, it's like, if you know Maslow's pyramid of need, right? You get to that existential top. And what's so funny to me, I had this thought, is like the irony of getting to the top of Maslow's pyramid of need, that you've got everything you need. All of a sudden, all you want is something to need. And so having purpose to get up in the morning is what drives a lot of these people. That's why they got to stay busy, because all of a sudden their identity is wrapped up in it, and all of a sudden their relevance goes away if they don't have those things. Well, who am I if I'm not running 3 companies and working 100 hours a week? Well, then who am I? And so I would tell, from a practical perspective, I am a big, big fan of counseling and allowing you to have a professional to help you dive into what is your life really about. What is it that you want out of life? And again, it's not black and white. It's not like you can't be that busy CEO.
That's right.
You can, but you have to have balance, and you have to know why you're doing it. Otherwise, you're going to wake up one morning with a wake behind you that you're really not very proud of, and a really unhappy feeling, and go, man, did I just waste my whole life like my guy in Eastvale?
Tell us about the Aerobics Center and Cooper Clinic today, and kind of your role, what you're doing, what your vision is, and where you want to take the business over the next however many years. So for the people who don't know, we're a 30-acre campus right in the heart of Dallas. It was actually an old estate. It was the Nichols family estate. They were the cab company in Dallas. And so it still has fruit trees and ponds. It's a beautiful,
it's beautiful.
The old colonial home. It's still there. But so my dad, when he came here in 1970, he had previously been with the Air Force and with NASA. That's how he got an interest in fitness. He had been an athlete. He has a longer story there. But he was working with the Apollo lunar missions, the men's going to the moon, back with NASA in the early 60s. And he was one of the flight surgeons, and he was tasked with how do you counteract the effects of long-term exposure to zero gravity, right? Because we know our body, at that time, they didn't know how much or how long. So how do you maintain physical activity, your strength, while you're in zero gravity? And so that's where he really launched into the concept of exercise as medicine, exercise as a quantitative measure of health. And so, well, like anything, you have to measure something to be able to manage it, right? And so I can't manage my cholesterol if I don't know what it is. Well, you can't measure your fitness if you don't know what it is. Yep. And so at that time, and even today, it was very qualitative. It was not defined. And so my dad, what he did is he started using VO2 testing, which is your body's ability to exchange oxygen, right, as a quantitative measure of someone's health. Well, to do that, you have to go to a maximal stress activity, running, whatnot, and wear this mouthpiece that actually exchanges the gas. It's very arduous. And so he was doing that and then correlating it with these guys' physical fitness, right? Guys and gals. And then but how do you scale that? Yeah. And so that's when he invented the 12-minute test, the Cooper test, which was a field test that statistically had an R-value correlation of 0.9 with an actual test. It means very, very good correlation. And so he believed that I'm going to keep measuring fitness, and eventually I'm going to put all that into a database in conjunction with other health risk factors and other medical results so that I can prove the benefits of fitness. But I can't do that here in the military. And so he wrote the book Aerobics, and what it was that 12-minute test and then 32 different cardiovascular exercises that were correlated to a point system by oxygen consumption in order to get a certain number of points to maintain a certain level of fitness. In a nutshell, that's what it was. It was like the first how-to exercise book, right?
Yeah. But again, very quantitative.
Very, very quantitative. It's very... You
got to have the data.
You got to have the data. So in 1970, he moved here. Funny story is he'd had a successful book, but he was not a wealthy man by any means. And there was no bank that would loan him any money. Again, the medical society is against him. People thought he was nuts. And there was a gentleman in town who ran a company, who was CEO, who had read his book, was a fan, and said, hey, if you ever come to Dallas, you need some help, let me know. And so as a last ditch effort, my father goes and sees this guy whose name was Joe McKinney, and he ran the Tyler Corporation. Well, Joe loaned him the money to get started back in, I think it was like $1.3 million in 1970. It was a big risk.
A lot of money. A
lot of money that Joe was betting on my dad.
Yep.
And so I was born at the same time, and they named me after the company. So I always joke it could have been a lot worse than Tyler.
It could have been.
So I was named after the company. So I literally, and the Aerobics Center is 6 days older than I am. So, I mean, we've been brothers our whole life.
That's incredible. I didn't know if I knew that.
Yeah. But so there's three main legs of the business, like a stool, if you will. Number one was the preventive medicine, which again, there was no such thing as preventive medicine clinics in 1970. Mm-hmm. You go to the doctor when you're sick, not when you're well.
Correct.
And so that was a novel idea. But the goal was that everybody who comes to the clinic, they're going to do a treadmill stress test to look for heart disease, but to also measure their level of fitness. And then we're going to do all the other metrics.
And you guys were really the first ones to do the treadmill stress test. Yeah. Like that was...
Again, that was one of the reasons they tried to take his medical license away from him, because he was doing treadmill stress testing. They thought he was going to kill people on the treadmill.
The whole heartbeat thing, I cannot believe it. It's amazing that only 40, 50 years ago, doctors were saying you only had X amount of heartbeats and you're using them up too quickly.
Right. It's crazy. But so for the last 53 years, the hundreds of thousands of people who've come through the clinic, we take their data, de-identified, of course, and there's 3,000 points of data roughly on every patient. So exercise is 1 point of data. A total cholesterol is 1 point of data. Glucose. So 3,000 points of data. And we've put all that into our database in the not-for-profit side. Most people don't realize we have a non-for-profit. We have a 501c3 that it has to be for our data to be valid. It can't be from the for-profit side. We can't look to be profiting off of our research and our data. Way. One, it's not credible, right? So the first thing my dad did when he came to Dallas was he started the nonprofit. And so that's the Cooper Institute. So all of the data freely transfers from the clinic into the database in the institute. Yep. And then we have our scientists over there who publish all the research. So the goal was collect the information, have the hypothesis that exercise is good for your health, and eventually produce studies that show that. Mm-hmm. Then the third original piece was the fitness center. Again, there were no such thing as fitness centers in 1970. You had maybe you had a weightlifting gym, or you had a YMCA.
There's a racquetball club in Fort Lauderdale, I know.
In 1970. It was probably after that. So
Maybe 77, 78. I bet you're right. I bet
so
you're
my
right.
dad launched that whole concept of physical fitness centers, So, I mean, he really, it's a really fascinating story. And what's interesting on a sidebar is he's just finished his autobiography that's coming out this year. So because his life's been amazing. I'm not doing it credit, but so then those are the three legs, and so that we have members of the fitness center, we have people who come to the clinic, we have a research division. From that, we've added on over the years. Right. We have a hotel because a third of all of our clinic patients come from out of town. And that represents about 20% of our room nights. And so we also do conferences and social events on campus. We have a vitamin line because we started doing research and supplementation in the mid-90s. It helps support our research. And we want to be a trusted voice because the vitamin industry is not very trustworthy. A lot of ridiculous statements that are not scientifically proven. So we want to be a trusted voice and a reliable product. We have a spa in our fitness center that we added on to. And we have, what I'm really excited about is our Cooper wellness strategies. And what it does is it takes our concepts and spreads them around the world. So from the earliest days, and I can say I have a private equity person come to me almost, 3 or 4 times a month.
I'm sure.
Hey, how do we invest? How do we go duplicate this?
Yes.
And then once I really started talking them through this, I'm like, this is not a money, but if you're looking for a 5-year flip on venture or whatever, this is not your business.
Yep.
If you're interested in changing people's lives and spending a lot of money to get it started and then getting a little return later, then you're in the right call. So point being is it's super capital intensive.
Yep.
And so my dad, interestingly enough, in the early 70s, he had opportunities to go build other gyms, start shoe lines, all sorts of stuff. And he made a conscious decision based on what he believed in, is that, no, I want to stay here. I want to make this the best in the world at what it does. And I want to prove my hypothesis. And so he just tuned out everything else. I mean, he could have been a billionaire multiple times over. I mean, think of all the industries that were launched that he could have got in on the ground floor.
100%.
They came to him.
100% he was offered.
Oh, he was offered all the time
because
throughout my life
of his name. Exactly.
And I mean, we still get it today, right? People trying to capitalize off of that because we have such an integrity of our business. And you got to understand, we're going to make decisions in this business that the average business person wouldn't make, because it's all about the end result of helping that person, not about the margin. And as long as we're making a reasonable amount of money in order to sustain the business and not put us at risk, then we're fine. We don't need more.
So let's talk about the preventative component. So obviously 53 years ago or, whenever, like, that was unheard of. Right. And now today you're starting to see.
Oh, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere, right?
All the books coming out.
All the books. And then, there's this new wellness center that's going in over here at Knox Henderson. And so talk about like the evolution of the industry itself, and then how you position within the industry going forward.
It's a really interesting question, and one we're living through right now, right? Yeah. So 53 years ago, we weren't tip of the spear; we were bleeding edge. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to stop us from doing. Not even that you're out there, and so it's really, really neat that what we've promoted and believe in so wholeheartedly is finally being accepted. I wouldn't say that it's not been accepted in the medical community in the last 20 years. It's just how do you do it?
How do you roll it out? Right.
Because it's not economically feasible within our current insurance system.
Well, and the industry doesn't train you. If you're going to go to be a doctor, you're not trained.
Right. Well, I'll give you a point. When I was working on the East Coast as a family practice doctor before I came back to Dallas, I was seeing 25, 30 patients a day. And I had maybe 10 minutes with them. The last thing I had time to do was talk about their exercise, which, although I knew that was the number one thing I could do for them, and I certainly didn't have the resources to test their fitness.
Right.
And so one of the projects, to answer your question, one of the projects that I'm doing is we're going to be who we are, and we're going to stay, and we're going to continue to be on the forefront of adding new technologies. Like, we're the ones who added CT scanning, looking at CAC scores. We added that in the mid 90s. I mean, we're always going to be looking at those things, but we're always going to be who we are. But so what I want to do, the number one thing I want to do right now is I want to take the foundational element of who we are, which is fitness and the evaluation of fitness, and make fitness a vital sign of health. And how do you do that, right? Well, you have to start with testing it. If you go to your primary care doctor right now, they're not going to measure your fitness. They may tell you, hey, I want you to exercise more. You're like, well, what does that really mean?
Yeah. Correct.
What do I need to do?
It's so nebulous. There's no
data. They're going to take your blood.
Yeah.
You're going to get your cholesterol
and it's not the doctor's fault. It's because it's a system.
Correct.
That's what it allows them to do. And because of the demand for healthcare is exploding because we're so much more unhealthy, doctors are just overwhelmed. The systems are overwhelmed. I always say we spend almost $4 trillion, 20% of our GDP on healthcare. And yet we have not the healthiest people in the world by any means.
Wow.
And it can't keep growing, right? It can't keep going. There's only so many dollars. And so what happens is you get the haves get it and the have-nots are out of luck. But so all that to say is, okay, I can't duplicate my product. My product is for a niche group of people. And I'm glad that I can serve those people. But because of the system and the way healthcare works, that's just going to be what it is. There's not going to be 100 Cooper clinics around the world, because it's just not feasible to the way insurance and healthcare works, right? So how do I transport the most important thing that we do into the primary care office? And that's fitness. That's fitness as a vital sign. And so what I've done is I've created a product that you think about when you go see your primary care doctor. Usually you go in and get your labs drawn first so that when you see the doctor, they have the lab results, right? And I want to do that with fitness. So prior to going in to see your primary care doctor, you would go in and do a fitness test. It's not like the ones you do at the Cooper Clinic. It's you either walk a mile as fast as you can or you run for 12 minutes as far as you can. And why do I choose those two? Because those have strong R values of statistical significance that correlate to an actual measured VO2. And so essentially I can do that test and I can give them a fitness score just like as if you came through the Cooper Clinic. So they'll do that test. It's super cheap. And that information then gets uploaded to the doctor because the doctor doesn't have time. And so now when the doctor's going over the results, say, hey, your cholesterol is this, your blood pressure is this, your fitness score is 37. That's actually good enough. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. Or, hey, your fitness score is in the bottom 20th percentile. Here's a walking program. I want you to get retested in 12 weeks. Because I know the doctor doesn't have time to do that, but they know how important it is because the science absolutely proves it. So to me, what's interesting is with that same test, because I believe so much in the valuation of fitness and with my business background, I've done studies with large corporations, including my own, where every year part of our employee benefits program, when you do your biometric screening, your blood, cholesterol, all that kind of stuff, fitness is part of it. They either do it on a treadmill or they do it outside on a track. And so their insurance benefits, like biometrics work, has fitness. But what was so interesting is that I assumed that the healthier people would cost me less, right? But in actuality, what happened is that they could just get out of the bottom category of fitness. My employee base in the bottom category of fitness, bottom 20 percentile, relevant to age and gender, as measured by one of these tests, cost me about $10,000 a person, whereas the poor and up all cost me about $2,000, and the people who are in the highest levels of fitness cost me about $5,000. They were over-exercising, injuries, orthopedic-related things. So there's an economic advantage to getting your number one is as an owner of a business, as a leader of a business, my job is to take care of number one of the people who work for me.
100%.
They are entrusted to me. I need to do everything I can to help them, right? And so I do that with my own employees. And so I recognize that not everybody's going to move out of that bottom category. But even if I can get a couple moving out, number one, I've changed their lives and the company's going to benefit from it because I know healthcare is going to go down. And one more thought to that, we did the same thing with Medicare dollars. We looked at people's levels of fitness back in the 80s when they were in their 40s or so and looked at their level of fitness the same way describing as I've described it. And then we got their Medicare dollars expense in the 2010s and evaluated it to their fitness levels. And the people who were in that bottom 20th level, bottom 20th percentile of fitness, if you just got out of that, you cut the Medicare cost by almost half.
Wow.
Tell me anything else in the world right now that most things with Medicare, you're just trying to control growth, right?
Right.
I'm talking about a singular test, one single test, not looking at anything else, not looking at smoking history, obesity, anything, just a single test of fitness and getting them to an adequate level, which we talked about earlier, can drop Medicare by 50%.
So that's how you solve the healthcare crisis. How do you get them to the adequate level? Right? Because now, I'm the guy, I'm in the poor category.
Right.
So I need to start walking twice a day. Right. But human nature, human behavior, how do I?
Right. So the number one thing I do is I want someone to, if I've never known what my cholesterol is, let's say I've never gone to the doctor, I've never tested my cholesterol. I may say, well, I eat healthy. I'm not that heavy. My parents look okay. My cholesterol's probably fine, but I don't know until I go and get the blood drawn, right?
Manage what you don't measure.
Right. But once I get it, whether or not I do something about it is my choice, but I can no longer deny that I have high cholesterol.
Right.
It's the same thing with fitness. My job is to say, listen, we're just going to let you know where you are. We're here to help you, but you understand that this is fact. This is where you are, and this is what it means. Now, I want to encourage you to help, and when you're ready for change, Prochaska's level of change and all that stuff, we'll help you. It's a basic, very basic 12-week walking program that takes you from where you are. And we have people who can't even do a whole mile, right? We say, that's fine. That's fine. You can only walk 400 yards, walk 400 yards. 100%. We're going to take you wherever you are. It's a very grace-based concept. Mm-hmm. And my goal is not to change everybody, because business owners invariably like, well, how do you change everybody? So no. It's a grassroots concept that you're doing the right thing for your people. And if you do the right thing for your people and you care about your people are going to take care of you.
So as a business owner, True North, or any of our business owners listening and watching, like, how do we apply this, what you've done with your employees? How do we do that?
Right. Well, shameless plug.
Sure.
This is, that's my company does that. That's what Cooper Wellness Strategy does. We work with corporations. We work with doctor groups to put fitness testing in as a vital sign of their people's health, and then educate them and give grace to where they are.
And then how does that work with the insurance?
So it depends on your specific system, right?
Right.
Whether you're self-insured, fully insured, all these different attributes, but whatever your biometric plans now for your people, we just tag on to that.
Yeah.
I tell people, like, listen, if you only have a certain amount of dollars, forget testing. If I have to choose of testing glucose and cholesterol and blood pressure and all those things versus testing fitness, I'm going to test fitness every time, because those things, vast majority of the time, are downstream of fitness. Mm-hmm. They're a result, not a cause. Right. Fitness is a cause. It has causation.
Right.
So that's where I focus that. But, I'll tell you one really cool story, because people say, oh, I can't, it's overwhelming, right? I can never get fit. So we had a guy who came to us in the year 2000. He weighed 538 pounds. His name's Rick Selesky. You can look him up. And he couldn't walk 50 yards. And we said, okay, Rick, this is where you are today. Great. Tomorrow we're going to shoot for 55 yards. And over the course of 2 years, just through diet and exercise alone, he lost 300 pounds, and he's kept it off now for 21 years.
Amazing.
At the 10-year anniversary, he and I went and ran the New York Marathon together.
No way.
Wow.
And we had t-shirts on behind us that had a picture of him at 538 pounds, and it was lost 300.
Wow.
And he ended up on Oprah. He got married, all this stuff. He's got a book coming out. A wonderful story. But my point in saying that is,
it can be done.
It can be done.
Get started.
But if you just change one life, it matters.
Yeah.
It's like, so I have a missionary friend of mine who works with missionaries all around the world. And he and I were talking one time, and he goes, you know what the average return, he's a Christian missionary, and he's in Iran, right? So he's living in hiding. Mm-hmm. He goes, you know what his expected return for someone to turn to Christianity in his lifetime of working in Iran? One person.
Yeah.
His entire life for one person. We think so achievement based. Yeah. We think so quantitatively that we got to have more. If it's not more, it's better. It's like, why what you have not enough?
Yeah.
Everybody's like, well, I got to make the Cooper Clinic bigger. Why? I'm not going to save the world. Why can't I be satisfied with what I have? Now, if there's obvious opportunities, great. So my point is, if I just change the life of one person in my company in putting these programs in place, but I know I changed that one life, then it was 100% worth it. Mm-hmm. I'm not measuring my value or my worth by something that I can put up on a board. Yeah. I mean, we want to scoreboard everything, but we're using our metrics of that scoreboard. We're not using real metrics that matter.
Yeah.
We want to quantify it all in business, because that's what we're trained to do, right? We're trained to quantify
P&L.
it. We're trained to a P&L.
Yep.
And we're trained to always do better than last year, rather than saying, well, last year's pretty good. I hope we have next year's like last year. Mm-hmm. But it's just, you get caught in the whirlwind of it. You get caught in the trap of it. But so I'm going in all different places. I have these testing facilities. It's just getting started, but I have one in New Jersey in a fitness center. I have one in Little Rock, Arkansas. I have one in Tacoma, here in Dallas, in Dubai. I did a study in Dubai, and it was interesting that I forget exactly, but I want to say it was 70% of the people were in the bottom category of fitness.
Wow.
Below 20th percentile.
Wow.
Of which maybe half of them were like first and second percentile. But we put them in this basic walking program. They got to choose. The majority of them did it. And I think it was something like 67% of them improved. Now they may have gone from 1% to 2%. We celebrate that.
100%. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. This is not a destination.
Correct.
We always say fitness, exercise, health. It's not a destination. It's a journey, as is life with everything else we've been talking about today. And fitness is the same way. If you can next year you can only walk half a mile, but this year you walked a quarter. Hey, we're going to celebrate the heck out of that. Good for you, buddy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, are we going to get to where you want the benefits? We're not quite there yet, but we're on the path and we see your life changing. What's so unique about Rick when he lost all that weight was who he became as a person.
Absolutely.
I mean, he just totally changed.
Correct.
As a person.
His purpose, his self-esteem,
Everything.
His mental health,
his mental health.
Like you start to unlock the potential for that person.
Right.
And otherwise they're all bound up, right?
Well, I'll tell you a very practical thing you can do in that regard with mental health is when you exercise, go by yourself and take no entertainment. Go out and run. Don't listen to a podcast. Maybe, listen to this another time, right?
Yes.
But just go out and run or walk or bike or whatever you're doing. If you're on a treadmill, well, a treadmill's kind of boring not to watch TV, but just be quiet. Like we used to do it 20, 30 years ago. It's so good for your mental health. I just challenge anybody who's listening to this, try it for a month. If you exercise regularly, do it with no entertainment and try to do it outside and see if in a month your mental stress hasn't improved. I know because I've done it for myself and it works every time.
Yeah.
Tyler, this is phenomenal. The way I want to wrap this up is I want you to, and you can take a second, think through 60 seconds to a minute or two. You got that hard driving, busy person leader. Challenge me to take a step in some direction, whether it's for my own life or my business. I love where you're going on business. Business owners is who we talk to. Maybe challenge them, give them a cause and effect, whatever analogy. What's going to move them from listening to this podcast when they were not running or walking?
A call to action.
A call to action. What's going to move them to do something?
Right. And I'll tell you, it's difficult because everybody's at a different spot,
I understand
right?
that.
But I would tell you the first thing I would tell someone to do is ask them why they are where they are today. Why are you where you are today? What motivated you to get to the place where you are today? Was it because you thought you were supposed to? Because you thought that was a summit that you could plant your flag and rest someday? No, why? And if you need a counselor to help you process that because you don't really know, you just thought that's what you're supposed to do because you're supposed to go to the big schools and you're supposed to make good money and you're supposed to have the second home. And that's what that's success, right? Well, why is that success? My grandfather was a cotton picker in a small town in Oklahoma during the Great Depression. Never had much money in his life. He was the happiest people I ever knew.
Yep.
So I would tell you, start with what is your motivation? Why are you where you are today? And then look at what's your biggest issue. Is it your health? Go find out. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you hadn't taken time to check your health. But again, look under the hood with your health. Look at the evaluation of your relationships with the people who are most important to you, whether your family. And just do a self-assessment is what I would tell you to do. Start with a self-assessment. If you need outside people to help you, mentally, physically, so forth, get the outside help, certainly. And then go back at the end of that process. You start with, okay, if I clear the slate of everything in my life, what am I adding back? And I can tell you in my own life, that's helped me so much. And there's freedom in it because there's nothing I got to do. In my faith, I'm like, listen, God doesn't need me. He wants me and he's using me. He doesn't need me. So I just got to live today. Like you guys asked me to come speak. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
Like whether or not this changes anybody's life, that's not why I'm here. This is not a pat Tyler Cooper on the back. Look at this wonderful advice I'm giving you. I'm like, no, listen, I've lived the path. These are the things I've learned. I hope they're helpful to you. I hope that you heed them because they've been very important to me. But I will tell you, there's an analogy that I use. I love analogy if you hadn't told that.
I love word pictures are awesome.
This is a faith analogy, but it's one that hit me and has changed my life in so many ways. I think about life, and you've heard this, Doug, but I think about life like a boat.
Yep.
And I'm on this shore and I'm going to this shore. This is birth, this is death. And I can only move forward. The boat never sits still because time never sits still, right? And when I'm born, I'm placed at the helm of that boat. I'm placed at that wheel, and I'm determining the direction of the path of the boat. I can go any direction I want. It's always going to be somewhere end up on this other shore, but I can go anywhere I want. Well, for me in my life, in my Christian faith, for me, I set a compass. And my compass of how I want to guide my life across the water is that marker of faith, my belief in Christ, right? And everything that comes with that, which is grace and peace and love. Well, storms come and dry spells come, or maybe there's a distraction or whatever it may be, and I get off course, but I still have a heading that I'm trying to live my way across the ocean until I reach the other side. But so I joke in that because right behind the boat, the wake's super tangible, right? You can surf it. I mean, all 5 senses, touch, smell, see, hear, all that stuff, you can totally experience. It's super, super measurable, which is what we've been alluding to, right? But that measurable part shrinks the farther you go back from the boat. And if I can get an aerial shot, if I go 2 miles back, that wake's, let's say 4 miles wide, still cruising right along, impacting every single thing that comes into its path. And yet I can't see that part of the wake. I can only see this narrow part that's right behind me. And so much of my life, and so much of many of our lives, is we try to judge the value and the worth of what we've done and who we are only by the wake that we can see.
So good.
And so one, we're missing the real picture, right? And two is if I'm staring at the wake, I can't see where I'm going. And so I'm going to get off course. And so in the wake, if you're leading a right path, good things are going to happen. If you're leading a wrong path, more than likely bad things are going to happen to the people in your wake, even the ones you don't see because you can't see back there. So I went back to the Bible and I'm like, all right, where can you see this story in the Bible play out? And I go back to the story of the widow's mite. And in that story, Jesus is in the temple area in Jerusalem and people are coming in to give their tithe to the temple, right? And so these rich guys come through and they give a ton of money, but it's very little of what they have in practicality. And the widow, who's the bottom rung of that society, she comes through and she gives her 2 mites or 2 pennies. It's all she has, but she puts them both in and she moves on. And then I say, oh, okay, what does Jesus do? He calls his disciples over and he says, hey guys, I want to tell you this story. And he tells this story. And in the Christian faith, it's an analogy of how we're to live our lives fully in our faith, right? But I looked at the story again, and as far as we know, I said, what did Jesus not do? He didn't go give her a husband. He didn't go give her a meal. He didn't give her a pat on the back. As far as we know, he didn't even acknowledge her existence. He didn't help her in any capacity that we know of. But yet, 2,000 years later, her wake is still dramatically impacting the world. And so I said, why would Jesus not have gone and done those things for her? Because her heading was already spot on. And all it would have done would have been a distraction from the plan that he had for her. And so what I tell people is, listen, in 100 years, again, no one's going to remember this. But the wake that we leave by the lives we live today will still be impactful. I am a product of grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-parents that I don't even know their names. But yet I am absolutely a product of the wake that they left of their life, where they focused on things that mattered. And I don't even know their names, and they're my own family members. So get out of the headspace of, man, I got to judge my wake. Or my skin's on the wall. Am I doing enough? Can I feel good about myself? It's a lie. You'll never feel good enough about yourself. But if you put your heading on something that's real, something that matters, something that's important, your life is going to leave a wonderful wake that will leave a legacy that you'll never see and you'll never know about, but it will leave a legacy that helps many, 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 many people going forward.
Tyler, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I don't think it'll be the last time we'll have you on here. There's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot for us to stay motivated and encouraged on the journey, because it's not a destination. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us on Decision Points.
Thank you guys for having me.